So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mushimi Bose, who's the mother of Elon. He was born with Zellweger spectrum disorder, a rare genetic disorder of peroxisome biogenesis. As a result of her personal experience with her son, Dr. Bose refocused her career goals to study rare disease. And over the last decade, Dr. Bose has conducted research and published multiple papers on the role of the family caregiver in the management of rare pediatric disorders. Currently, Dr. Bose holds a faculty position in the Department of Nutrition and Food Sciences at Montclair State University in New Jersey, studying quality of life, patient-focused drug development, dietary assessments, and health equity issues in rare disease communities. Dr. Bose is passionate about learning what is important to rare disease families, and using that information to improve their lives. And on a personal note, I'll say I met Dr. Bose, I think 2 years ago at Nord, and I just watched her give a talk. And we met in the hallway after a talk, and she's very interested in nutrition and rare disease. And I said, well, you should learn about TANGO2. And she said, okay. And here she is today. So that's the type of person that she is. She's just been kind of full throttle and doing great work already. So Dr. Bose.
Good morning. Dr. McKenzie, thank you very much for that nice introduction. I am super excited to be here today to share some of the very ground level preliminary work that we've done here. I want to just extend my gratitude to the TANGO2 Research Foundation, particularly Dina and Anne for inviting me to speak here today, share a little bit of what we've learned so far, and this is definitely meant to be a work in progress, and we need your help to help us continue this journey that we're on. Thank you. I have so many thank yous along the way, but we'll just start with, since I only have 30 minutes. So the research that I'm going to be presenting here today, this preliminary research, was funded through the TANGO2 Research Foundation. So once again, thank you. I'm putting this slide here just to very clearly state that the statements that are made here in this presentation, they're mine and my team's, they're of ours. They don't necessarily represent the views of the TANGO2 Research Foundation. So I just wanted to put that disclaimer in there. So let's just give an overview of what we're going to be talking today over the next 30 minutes. I'm going to just introduce myself a little bit, although Dr. McKenzie did a really nice introduction. Thank you again. And then I'm going to provide a little bit of rationale, background for the study that we're doing. And then we'll just get right into the questions that we wanted to get answered and how we went about trying to answer those questions. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we found out, what we need to continue to find out, and what the next steps are. And spoiler alert, the next steps are we need more people to enroll in our studies. So just if you take away nothing from this talk today, we need more people to enroll in our studies. So thanks. And then I'll take questions at the end. So let me just very briefly tell you a little bit about myself, because I always just, whenever I'm talking to rare disease communities, I like to just introduce my own experience very briefly. So I'm the mother to this little guy here. This is Elon. He was born with a very severe form of a disease called Zellweger spectrum disorder. And like TANGO2, ZSD had a lot of, symptoms that affected his overall quality of life, including seizures, including, feeding difficulties, so I have a background in nutrition. I got pregnant with Elon when I was doing my postdoctoral fellowship at Columbia in nutrition, diabetes, and obesity. And when he was born, just given all of the challenges that he had, I had to quit my postdoc to take care of him. And after he passed away, I kind of walked away from my career in research, and after a lot of soul searching, realized that I still had an interest in doing research, but I was much more interested in learning about other experiences in rare disease. So right now I call myself a community researcher in rare disease. I'm really interested in the public health needs of the rare disease community. And, in the last several years, I've been given this just great opportunity to meld my passion and training in nutrition with, what I've learned over the last decade or so in rare disease, doing dietary assessments in different rare disease populations. So that's about the time when I met Dr. McKenzie, and he told me about the TANGO2 community, and here I am today. So I'm not telling you guys anything about TANGO2. I'm the person that's really here learning today, right? So, but I put these slides in here as a background. What I've learned, and this is just sort of what's made sense to me, but, feel free to educate me, throughout this time that I'm here, because there's so much stuff that me and my team still have to learn. But what's made sense to me in sort of understanding the burden of TANGO2 is in these sort of like 3 buckets of symptoms: these episodic TANGO2 spells, the chronic symptoms that people with TANGO2 face almost daily, and then the more acute metabolic crises. And in the research that we've done in the literature over the last 2 years that I've learned about TANGO2, what I've learned is that, historically, like before the vitamin therapy, there were no treatments that were specific to TANGO2, and that treatments were primarily symptomatic, okay? And that was before we learned about the fact that, individuals that took multivitamin supplements that had B vitamins in them really helped manage the symptoms of TANGO2. And so this was where we really started learning about the role of B vitamins. So vitamins is something I do know about. So let me talk for a second about vitamins for a second. So we're gonna be talking about B vitamins, obviously. So as a group, B vitamins, these are these 8 water-soluble, organic, and when I say organic, it means, in a chemistry perspective, like they're carbon-containing, not certified by the USDA. These vitamins are water-soluble, as I said before, which means they're not stored in large quantities in the body, but there are indeed exceptions. Now, among these 8 vitamins, they have a variety of functions in the body. But when I'm teaching classes about vitamins, especially about the B vitamins, I group them into these sort of 3 chunks of in terms of what they do regarding function. So several B vitamins are involved in helping convert macronutrients, and when I say macronutrients, I mean carbs, I mean fats, I mean proteins, into molecules like ATP that are used for energy in the body, right? So that's one. B vitamins may also be involved in the production and supporting the production of neurotransmitters, which help support brain health. And another, big sort of bucket of function that B vitamins is in the assistance of the production of specific cell types, as well as genetic material like DNA and RNA. Okay. So what do we know about B5? So how does B5 fit into this, right? So B5 pantothenic acid, this is again, water-soluble vitamin. One of the major functions of B5 is in that role of converting certain macronutrients, especially fats, into molecules that are used for energy like ATP. And it does this, B5 does this as part of a molecule called coenzyme A. So that's what you see here, this whole thing. There we go. This whole thing is coenzyme A. So you may be asking, what the heck is a coenzyme? So coenzymes, what they do is that they assist in enzymatic reactions, meaning that they assist in the conversion of one molecule into another molecule in the body. That's basically what coenzymes do. And there are specific coenzymes that are involved in specific conversions. And as I said before, B5 is involved primarily in the conversion of certain macronutrients into molecules like ATP. In terms of the requirements for B5 for people without TANGO2, for the typical population, the requirements are about 2 to 5 milligrams per day. You guys probably already know this. B5 is found in abundance of foods in the diet. So for the most part, we don't really even talk about B5 outside of TANGO2, right? Because I until I started learning about TANGO2, my lectures on B5 would be a blip. It would be like, here's B5. We don't know what it does when you don't have enough of it, because we get plenty of it. The end. And and now I feel like I spend a little bit more time when I go lecture to my students. Bottom line is, in typical populations, there's no real issue with deficiency. And it's water soluble, so we don't really worry about excess either. Now, B9 folate, okay, that is, this is also serves a coenzyme function, but it's involved in different reactions. The reactions that it's involved in is really in the synthesis, the making of genetic material like DNA and RNA. It's also involved in the metabolism or the breakdown of certain amino acids in the body, and it's also involved in reactions that help increase antioxidant activity in the body. So, regarding requirements, the doses are actually lower than what you would see in B5, but it's not as abundantly found in foods. Folate is primarily found in leafy greens, and if you ever look at like any sort of like grain ingredient labeling, you see enriched cornmeal or enriched flour, with things that are enriched, those have folate added to them, right? So if you're not consuming very much of these and not taking a supplement, then there have been instances, and certain populations are actually at higher risk for folate deficiency. This is outside of TANGO2, right? So why am I talking about this? Because we know that, there have been, as Dr. McKenzie has alluded to earlier, as well as, I'm sure everybody here knows this, there are several, many case studies, a lot of them done by some of the people here in this room, looking at the role of B vitamins on the management of symptoms in TANGO2. In these studies, the majority of these case studies, and when I say case studies, we're talking about, studies that have 2 or 3 subjects tops that have been described in the studies, that they focus primarily on metabolic crises and TANGO2, but there have been a few that have looked at some of these chronic symptoms as well. So there seem to be effects on, EEG, data. There is, looking at seizures, mobility symptoms, as well as speech. The doses that have been looked at in these studies, they range, for B5, they range from about 25 to 1,000 milligrams. For B9, they range anywhere from 400 to 5,000 micrograms or 5 milligrams. So starting at those required doses for the overall population, and then getting really in very much larger doses beyond that, right? So these are really great studies to serve as a foundation to really try to understand what the role of B vitamins are in TANGO2. But, in the published literature, there's a lot of stuff that we hear anecdotally, sort of conversationally, but in the published literature, these case studies are really, what we have right now. So there's still a lot of work to be done. There's great work that's already been done, but there's, we still have a ways to go. So I think first and foremost, in terms of addressing specific gaps in the research, as Dr. McKenzie before me said, is that we need to really identify what are these optimal doses that are important in the management of symptoms in TANGO2. But before we do that, there's a lot of other questions that we need to ask. One of the things that I'll mention is, case studies, as I said before, it's only, there are about 2 to 3 subjects in that study. So we need to see, again, in the literature, I know, here at this meeting, we know that everybody that's taking B vitamins, they do better, right? But we need to have that published in the literature very clearly and very, very specifically, looking at a population, looking at a group of more than 2 or 3, and seeing the effects of B vitamins on that group, right? The other thing I want to mention is, and I'm a little bit biased because I'm in nutrition, is that I recognize that in order to get the doses that we're talking about here, you're definitely going to have to, supplement the diet with, these capsules, powders, whatever, with dietary supplements. But we do get B5, B9 from our foods. So I think that even though it's probably a very small contribution, it's really important to at least understand how much B vitamins the TANGO2 community is getting from their food in addition to supplementing, right? So taking all of this stuff together. Oh, and one more thing I'll mention is, and if anybody here has already participated in our study, first of all, thank you very much. Really, really appreciate it. share your story. But if I was there in that interview, one of the things that I always say before we got started with the interview is that, yeah, obviously we want to do clinical trials and, do more solid research so we can get evidence-based guidelines for what are the optimal doses of TANGO2. But before we do that, we need to just get an idea of how much B vitamins people are taking every day before we design a clinical trial, because that's what this information is what's going to allow us to do the most well-designed clinical trials that are feasible and ethical. So that's the sort of impetus for the objectives of the study that I'm going to present to you today. So overall, we kind of, as I said before, we need to look at, overall nutrient intake. That's not the data that I'm going to be sharing here with you today. But if you go to the poster session, one of my master's students has this sort of like overall nutrition, like how much carbs, lipids, proteins, all of that stuff. So I encourage you to go over to the poster session and look at her poster as well as all the other posters. So that was the initial sort of objective of the study, is to look at what are people with TANGO2 eating on a day-to-day basis. But more specifically, what we wanted to look at is, how much B5 or how much B vitamins are they getting in the diet? And then taking that a step further, how does these levels of B5 that they're getting in the diet, how do they relate back to the symptoms that these people with TANGO2 have? Okay, so that is those are the data that I'm going to be presenting here today. So what we are looking at is the association. What is the relationship between how much B5 and B9 someone with TANGO2 is taking, and how does it relate back to symptom frequency? And so when I say symptom frequency, we're talking about how often is that occurring, as well as symptom severity. So those were our two major objectives, and based on all of the literature that has already been published, as well as everyone sharing their stories, we hypothesized that increased B5 and B9 intake would be associated with a decreased symptom frequency and severity in people with TANGO2. Okay, so those were the objectives of the study. So what do we do? All right, so this grant was given to us in the summer of 2025. We had to do a lot of just getting ready for this study in the first several months, and then we were actually able to start collecting data in December of 2025. And we collected data through these interviews, which I'll describe in just a second, from December through March of 2026. The participants that participated in this study were primarily parents of individuals diagnosed with TANGO2. So our inclusion criteria, it said parents, step-parents, and legal guardians, but currently all the 20 that we have interviewed, or there's 23 now, have been parents. Okay, so something I want to mention here is that all of these interviews were done online. So it was parents reporting on their child with TANGO2's intake, okay? And so that's why we refer to this as caregiver, there we go. Caregiver reported vitamin B5 and B intake, and also caregiver reported symptom frequency and symptom severity, okay? So those were the people that we had interviewed. Notice that we have gotten 20, it's now 23. We're looking for 60. So once again, underlying theme, we need more people for our study. So this is what we did. So as I mentioned before, we spent the first couple of months after we were given this grant funding to recruit and set up, and we were able to start recruiting in October of 2025. When we were recruiting, and some of you may know, the people that we recruited were sent an online survey. We were asking, demographics. I'll show you a little bit about that in just a second. Once we got our demographic survey out and people completed it, part of the validated assessment to do this dietary intake requires the person participating in the study to receive some documentation to help them through that interview. So that documentation is called a food amounts booklet, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a second, really to help to estimate with estimations of portion size. Then once they confirmed that they got the booklet, we conducted these interviews starting in 2025, and I'll talk a little bit about what that interview consisted of. And then by 2026, we were doing our data analysis, and we were kind of doing a lot of data analysis through March, because a lot of this data that we collected here was done as part of a master's thesis for my student, and she defended her thesis in April. So it was like a very quick data analysis. So there's still a lot of work to be done here. So let's talk about some of the information that we collected. So in our demographic survey, that online survey all of our participants took, this is some of the information that we asked. We asked if the person with TANGO2 was orally fed or tube fed. We asked them for their address so that we could send them this documentation, and then we asked them if they need translation services. And we've actually had 2 participants that needed translation services. So shout out to Dr. Miyake's team for providing that translation services. Very appreciated. All right, so there were 2 parts of this interview that we did. One was the dietary assessment interview, which I'll talk about right now. So the dietary assessment interview was done with a trained registered dietitian using validated methods to collect data over what a person ate over a 24-hour period. This assessment, it's called a 24-hour dietary recall. This is, again, a validated assessment for, it's one of the gold standards in terms of self-reported dietary assessments in both research and clinically. So this dietitian, in order to do this dietary recall, used 2 tools. One was the USDA, again, validated multipass method. So what actually happens, and I won't get into the weeds here because I know I don't have that much time, but what happens in this interview is the person that's participating in the interview, the dietitian asks them, when was the first time that your child with TANGO2 ate in the last 24 hours? And if it was from noon one Monday to noon Tuesday, say, okay, we're going to start on noon Monday, and you tell me when was the first time they ate from noon Monday, okay? And then they go through this sort of pass from 12 to 12 the next day over that 24-hour period. But part of that multipass method means that they actually go through it multiple times, right? So they go from noon to noon, first getting some information and then having them go through it again and then having go through them again, asking for different information, but it gives the people that are participating opportunities to be like, oh yeah, I forgot, I had a granola bar here. So this is meant to be a very thorough probe for getting the information on what they ate over the last 24 hours. Once the dietitian collected this data, they entered it into this software, and that was the next tool, this tool called Nutrition Data System for Research. And this is, again, I have issues with this software, but it is still considered the gold standard for doing nutrition research right now. Working on that to improve that, but whatever. This is the gold standard currently. It's got this extensive database of food items. So just think of it as like a very fancy MyFitnessPal, right? And then they entered it, and it would give us information on how much vitamin A they ate, how much vitamin B, and all that information when you entered it into the computer. Okay, so that is the dietary assessment part of the study. I'm going to talk about a couple more things regarding that dietary assessment, and then we'll move on to the second part. So that documentation that I said that was mailed out, this is this food amounts booklet. This is really, again, just a way to help measure portion size, and this is part of that validated process, right? So in these booklets, you'd see things like bowls and be like, did they have a bowl of oatmeal? If they had a bowl of oatmeal, did the oatmeal go to level A or level B or level C? So that's what these booklets had. So let's talk about the second part of the interview, which was the symptoms survey. And this was a survey that we developed in-house to try to get an assessment of how often or how severe. And this was, so we asked about several symptoms, and you'll see them listed here. They include some of the more common physical symptoms, but we also include some of the behavioral and psychosocial symptoms as well. And we asked about frequency, which is, again, how often. So we had these categories of never, which was scored as 1, up to always, which was scored as 5. And severity, again, low severity was scored low, and high severity was scored high. We also asked them questions about whether or not their child had a previous metabolic crisis and when they started on B vitamins. And the things that we measured, with this dietary assessment and with this survey is, looking at overall nutrient intake, including B vitamin intake. But again, with the overall stuff, with macronutrients and the other micronutrients, definitely go to Z's poster in the poster session to get that information. With the symptom survey, we looked at the frequency scores and the severity scores. Another thing that we were able to also get from some of the subjects that participated in the study, and again, shout out to the Baylor Natural History Study team for providing this information. With some of the people that participated in the study, we were also able to look at this validated DP4 score, which is an assessment tool for development and cognition. So, many of you probably participated in this assessment when you were, at a visit for the natural history study. And then we looked very simply, we looked at the relationship between diet and then the symptoms as well as these DP4 scores. Okay, so let's spend a few minutes talking about what we got, and then I will close out and take whatever questions we have. So we had, what I'm presenting here are the results of 20 people that participated in this study, and the results that you see here are on the individuals with TANGO2, not the caregivers that were reporting on them, because this is a caregiver-reported study. We had a wide variety of age ranges, kind of down the middle regarding sex. In terms of age of diagnosis, most were actually diagnosed pretty early, and then this is information on when they started on B vitamins. Most of the people that participated in the study had reported that their child had had a metabolic crisis previously. All right, so what did we find out? So let's talk about B vitamin intake, and then we'll talk about symptoms in just a second. So, again, when you have a study that's 20 people, you're going to have a lot of variability in the study. This is a very small amount, and even for a rare disease, right? But these are the breaks when you're working in rare disease. So the caveat I will say here is in terms of average B5 and B9 intake, we got about close to 400 milligrams per day. Remember, what is required is 2 to 5 milligrams, so quite a bit higher. But caveat, if you look at this number here, this tells you that variability, the standard deviation. So this is plus or minus 300, right? So, there's a lot of variability here in this data, but, it's something, right? And with respect to folate consumption, 400 micrograms is what is typically consumed, and we've got close to 8,500 micrograms. But then look at this variability. This is nuts. So bottom line, we need more data to sort of level this out, guys. And as expected, the majority of this intake was due to supplements, right? And these levels were much, much higher than what is this DRI that's referring to the daily requirements, right? So let's look at symptoms. So remember, in terms of symptom frequency or symptom occurrence, not having the symptoms was scored low, whereas always having these symptoms. And the thing that I didn't mention here in this survey is that the recall period was in the last 7 days. So we did that 24-hour assessment, then we looked back, then we asked about, think back to the last 7 days, how frequently or how severe were these symptoms over the last 7 days? So we have a variety of responses. So remember, the higher numbers means that it was more severe. And some of these symptoms were scored pretty low because I think, a lot of these folks were on B vitamins, and I think the numbers were low. I have some other thoughts about this, but, we'll talk about it another time. And then with severity, it's even lower, right? So again, same sort of problems we had with the intake, a lot of variability, and in this case, the numbers are kind of low. Okay. Now, what did we find out when we looked at the relationship between intake and symptoms? Okay. So these are some of the data that we looked at, and we did some statistical analysis to look at the correlation. So if we look at p-values less than 0.05, that means that they're statistically significant, even though this data looks kind of like all over the place. But basically what this is saying is, so this is one of the symptoms that we looked at. We looked at overstimulation, right? Overstimulation means like, heightened response to sensory stimuli. So, like a sensory processing kind of issues. You're sensitive to light, sound, taste, textures. And we found that with increasing B5 intake, that sort of sensitivity started to go down, okay? And that was statistically significant, okay? We also found similar trends with the frequency of overstimulation as well as with sleep disturbances, but they weren't actually statistically significant, so I'm not showing you that data here, but that's something that we found. Again, remember, we have very small numbers, and that's probably part of the reason that we didn't see everything being, that sort of clean relationship. This is B9, and we found relationships where with increasing B9 intake, there was a reduction in the severity of ataxia as well as the severity of exotropia, the eye wandering, okay? And then this is actually incorrect. I apologize for this. This is reporting on B5, and I should have, it was meant to say B9. With B9, we also found, similar trends with overstimulation as well as disorientation. So those are some of the results that we found with our symptom survey. Now, we were only able to get DP4 scores from 8 people that were participating of the 20, okay? But in that, when we looked at nutrient and B5 and B9 intake against DP4 scores, what we found, so the DP4 score is broken down into 4 sections, right? One of them is this socio-emotional standard score, and with that, we actually found with increasing B5 intake, the socio-emotional standard score increased, and that was very statistically significant, even with just 8 people participating. So this is, ground level. Like, this is the first steps of what we're doing, right? So there's still a lot of work to be done, but this is what I'll show you today because I'm starting to run out of time. So overall, what we found is that on average, people consumed close to 400 milligrams of B5 a day, but caveat, lots of variability there, right? With B9, about 8,400 micrograms per day compared to the 400 that is recommended generally for most populations. In general, we're starting to see relationships between certain symptoms of B5 and B9 intake with respect to overstimulation severity. We saw this improved DP4 score, particularly in that socio-emotional domain. And then with B9, we see decreased ataxia and exotropia severity, okay? So that's what our data shows. Obviously, it's just a starting point. So this is, yes, it's just 20, but it's more than 3, so it's something, right? So it's just, in a stepwise way, we're starting to see these relationships. The previous data looked at some psychosocial symptoms, but the overstimulation, I don't think, and the sensory issues, I don't think has been previously published. So this is something that I think it's important to explore. This is the first time that we've looked at B5 against DP4 scores, so that's cool. So when we looked at some of these lines that were generated from these relationships, we did some really, really crude math and found that if we were to extrapolate when we started to see, sort of good effects of B5, and this is, again, crude math, right? But starting out at looking at doses about 150 to about 250 milligrams per day may be beneficial for symptom management. Again, lots and lots of work that needs to be done here to further support this, but again, it's a starting point, right? And with the variability in folate intake, this range is wild, but starting point. And hopefully this will serve as a foundation for future research in B vitamin guideline development, like in those clinical guidelines that we're talking today. Some of the limitations of the study is that this was a very small sample size. It made it really hard to do some of the magical math of statistics to be able to look at these relationships. The survey itself, the symptom survey, it's something that we came up with in our team. So we, there's still, we still need more work in sort of validating these survey assessments of symptoms. People who participate in the study, the majority of them were already on high doses of B vitamins. So it's really difficult to make these types of relationships work when you only have a group of people that are taking large doses. So we have to sort of think about, study design to be able to get that, really good relationship there. So I have 1 minute left, so I'm going to just very quickly say, we need more participants in our study. So I have a QR code that I'm going to give you, that I'm going to share. This is a sign-up sheet, a Google Doc, where I'm just going to ask you, if you have not participated in the study and you're interested in participating in the study, sign up on that Google Doc and just give me your email address and I'll reach out to you. If you are enrolled in the natural history study, you're automatically consented for this study. But if you have not, that's totally fine. There are people here that can consent you for the natural history study. So sign up for the natural history study too if you haven't done it. Little plug there. The other thing I'll mention is in the other room over there, we're still looking at more objective dietary assessments, not just caregiver reported. So we've got these fun veggie meter readings. So it's in the information to sign up for it, I believe, is page 8 of your book. My folks, my team over here in the back, raise your hand. There you are. Hi, guys. They're doing the veggie meter readings. It's a lot of fun, and you can get little squishy tomato balls and, water bottles and all sorts of fun things if you participate in these. And then you get an assessment of how many veggies are you eating per day. And everybody wants to know that information, right? So please do that. For the dietary assessment study, come and talk to me, because if you want to do that, we also have those booklets to give to you here so that we don't have to mail them out to you. And that hopefully that will allow us to get more people to participate in our study. So I just want to thank, again, the TANGO2 Research Foundation, all these wonderful people, all of our participants. Thank you so much. I still owe you some information, so I'll be emailing you guys soon. And I want to thank specifically Kasha and Veronica for sharing their experiences, participating in the study, encouraging other people to participate. My team, this is all data that I've lifted from my master's thesis student, so I'm totally stealing her data. Z is the person that did all of this research. Natalie, Laura, they're here today. Yes, thanks, Z. You're awesome. And our dietitian, my colleagues at Montclair State, and definitely the folks at Baylor College of Medicine, Dr. Miyake's group, Sergio, and Julissa, thank you so much. Dr. Lilani, thank you so much. And obviously, Dr. McKenzie, thank you for introducing me to the community here, because I'm really excited to be here. So I will end there.